Hello and welcome to the NPTEL course on Environmental Impact Assessment. This course is being taught by Dr. Harshit Choshan Lakra, who's an assistant professor at the Department of Architecture and Planning, Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. I am Isha Rathore, PMRF and Research Scholar at the Department of Architecture and Planning, IIT Roorkee. And this is week 2 problem solving session. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. So please mute yourself for the session. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat box. And if you have any queries at different points, I will ask you if you have any queries. You can then either raise your hand or unmute yourself for asking questions, or you can also put them in the chat box. The outline of the session, how we proceed in these presentation is we look up at the highlights from each of the week. That is, we look up at the key takeaways from each of the lecture units. And then we look up at assignment questions. So we're going to look up at assignment questions from previous run of the course. With the solutions to them. And then we're going to also look up at assignment problems from this week's content. But since the deadline for the week 2 assignment has not passed, so we will not look up at the solutions to them. We will look up at week 1 and week 2 solutions in the next session. And if we received any queries from you in this regarding this week's content in the discussion forums, so you have a ask a question tab in your NPTEL portal. So if you can post your queries there also when you go through the lecture videos. And if we received any of those queries, we will clarify them in the further down the presentation. And we will also look up at some additional content based on whatever we have discussed in this week and whatever is relevant in the uh, relating to this week's content. This part of the section, that is the additional content, will not be included in your final examination, will not be included in your assignments as well. This is just for a deeper understanding of the topic, for the like for your own thinking and how this week's content can be applied to a more practical perspective. Okay. Week 2 talked about legal policy and regulatory framework. So we look up first at the highlights from week 2. So lecture 6 looked up at definition, process, and purpose of AIA. So here we looked up at the economic development process in the environmental context, and we looked up at the definitions of environmental impact assessment. Now, these definitions covered a wide range of key terms. Now, all of these definitions, from an examination point of perspective, are important. And which agency said what definition is the underlying factor which differentiates them. So the key terms which we look up at in all the definitions of AIA are mostly environment, the impact on environment, the kind of activity which is having an impact on environment, assessing these impacts of the activity, then also the process of identifying these activities, their impacts on the environment and the different components of the environment. Then it's some definitions also defined as a legislative proposal. Some looked up at development from a development point of view, like a development proposal and EIA required for that. It's also considered as a major decision. It's also considered as an operational procedure and something which has a relevant effect. So these are key terms which have occurred in the definitions which were discussed in this week. But you need to go through the definitions and remember which agency said what definition. We also looked up at the economic development process in the environmental context, and this was adapted from Boulding, who defined this in 1966. So we look up at how any input have a which generates output contributes to the economy, and these outputs contribute to the gross national product, which includes your gross development product, your GDP, as well as certain other factors. And any input or any process has waste generation. So your input contributes to the economy but also generates outputs and waste. Now, these wastes further cause environmental pollution, and which in turn affects the environment. And these inputs are basically sourced from the environment. So there's always a resource depletion which is happening when any process or any economic development process is happening because the inputs are being generated from the environment. So, for example, if you use consider coal. You are basically using the coal which is available in the environment. You are burning it to, let's say, generate electricity, which is your output, but you're also getting pollution in terms of emissions which are coming out of it. So that's your waste. It is contributing to the economy in terms of the electricity which is being supplied to the different sectors of the uh, different sectors, and further helps in the productivity of the people and different activity generation as well. But it causes this emissions which lead to this environmental pollution, which is degrading your environment, which is why the shift towards renewable sources is being proposed now. So that's just one example of how this process works. So this is an important, uh, let's say, perspective to look up at the economic development process from an environmental perspective. Next, we also looked up in this lecture towards the EIA process and the purpose of environmental impact assessment. So first, we have the project screening. So whenever you want to do a EIA, you look up at the kind of project that you are getting. So you see if this project requires an environmental impact assessment. Now you look up at it in terms of the area of the project, the type of project which the type of project, like the type of project or construction or development activity, and how it is going to affect or impact the environment. So that is project screening, where you first determine whether an environmental impact assessment is required for this kind of project. Now, there are certain guidelines and things which are available to go about project screening, which we will discuss in the next week. Um, then we also look up at scoping. The next step is scoping, then, where we determine which impacts and issues should be considered. Like, for example, what impacts are going to be considered on the different environmental parameters, like how it is affecting air, water, uh, biodiversity, all of these in the development area, as well as if it's affecting it on a much larger scale. Its impact extend beyond the site at which this development is happening. So you look up at what type of impacts are happening and what issues should be considered in this project. Next, we give a description of the project, the development actions and alternatives. That is, you write a summary of what type of development activities, how many units, or what sort of development is going to happen, and what are the different alternatives if certain development action has a significant impact on the environment. So what could be alternatives to that? So that is the third step. Then we determine or describe an environmental baseline, which is a base case from which we are going to consider the effects of the project development which is happening. And then we identify the key impacts which are happening. So this is the first stage, which is the screening phase. Then we have the prediction of impacts, where we predict what impacts are happening, what are the type of impacts which are happening, whether they are reversible, irreversible, and will they be renewable, non-renewable, on all the different environmental parameters. Then we evaluate and assess the significance of these impacts, whether they are significant, whether they are not significant. And then we propose and identify mitigating measures which can help in reducing or mitigating the effects of these impacts on the different environmental parameters. The next step is the presentation of findings in the environmental impact study. So this is a report which is generated out of the EIA. So you present all of these findings and all of these steps in the environmental impact study report. Then there's a review of the environmental impact study, which is done by different agencies who are relevant for this particular kind of project. And then a decision making happens, whether the EIA is correct or not, whether certain measures have to be revised and certain. Okay, so I think we have a question. So I would like to take the questions after we have discussed the highlights. This will not take much time. We're just going to go through the brief review of whatever was discussed in this entire week's content. Then the decision is being made on EIA, whether the EIA is correct and whether certain measures need to be included in these for these impacts and other things. And after the EIA is approved, you have the post-decision monitoring. That is, whatever was written in the environmental impact study is being performed as per what was proposed. And then we do an okay. Then we do an audit of the predictions and the mitigation measures. That is, what predictions and what measures have uh, were significantly relevant and what were correct. So this is the entire process. So first is screening, then there's prediction, then you have the report, and then there's a post monitoring and auditing process. And at different points in all of these stages, we have public consultation and participation. That is, we involve these key stakeholders who are going to be impacted by the development of the project, and we take their opinions and their grievances and their considerations into all of these different stages of the project. So their consultation and participation is included in all of these initial three stages, except for the monitoring and auditing phase, which is the last stage. Okay, so that was lecture 6. Moving on to lecture 7, we looked up at environmental impact assessments, impact areas, current and emerging. So this was part 1. Lecture 8 is part 2 of the same topic. So here we looked up at the typology of the environmental impact. So we looked up at different categories of the impacts. So type can be biophysical, social, health, or economic. By nature, the impacts can be direct or they can be indirect. That is, they're affecting directly an environmental process, that is disposal of waste into water leads to direct water pollution, whereas let's say emissions in the whereas the fishes eating these plastics leads to microplastic problem, which is sort of an indirect effect. So these the nature of the effect is also considered. Then there are cumulative effects, which are the uh, clubbing of different effects together. Then we have magnitude or severity. So on magnitude and severity, we have high impact, high magnitude, moderate magnitude, and low magnitude. So whether it's affecting more or affecting less on that scale. Then the extent of the impact, that is how by the geographical boundary, how much is this impact affecting, whether it is affecting at a local level or at a regional level, or it is affecting the transboundary or global at a global scale. That is, it is not just limited to that particular country, and it's also affecting the other nearby countries and regions. Then we also have timing, which is whether it will have an immediate effect or you will see this effect playing out in the long term. Like over the years, you will see the impact of your development proposal. Then the duration, that is whether this impact is going to be temporary or is it going to be permanent. Then uncertainty, that is whether this impact has a low likelihood of happening or whether it has a high probability of happening, because all of these impacts are being predicted by the experts, and they are also not all of these environmental processes are complex, so you are basically just predicting the impacts of the uh, project or the development activity which is happening. So it could be so you are speaking in terms of uncertainty, so you need to express those terms as well, and you look up at certain other projects and examples to determine your impacts and their definitions. Then we have reversibility, whether this impact is going to be reversible or irreversible, and at what time duration will it be reversible. All of those things are also considered. Then the last parameter is significance, whether this impact is significant or whether it is unimportant uh, in the terms of in the different environmental parameters which are there. Okay, so all of these impacts are then measured on your air, water, biodiversity, and all of these other land, geography, geology, and all of those things. Okay. Uh, then, so EIA impact areas, they include your biophysical impact, that is impact on air, soil, land, geology, flora, fauna, biodiversity, water, noise, transportation, landscape, and visual effects. Then you have socio-cultural impact, which is when your communities and societies and any development project affects the communal or community sense or social settings. Uh, that is the socio-cultural impact. Then you also have, so this could also be like language impacts, that certain language is being removed because of the influx of the population or the bigger population which is coming in. So all those kind of different impacts are considered. Then health and safety, something which affects the health and safety of all of these different environmental parameters. whether there are monetary and fiscal impacts which are happening, so economic and fiscal impacts. Then indigenous peoples' right and traditional areas. So these are when certain indigenous people or tribal communities are being affected, and when a development is proposed in close to regions where these communities habitate, because they are basically cut off from the urban and the rural population. They have their own set of beliefs and own set of customs and guidelines which they follow. So, in development in these kind of areas is also a very challenging and sensitive topic. So, these are impacts which you need to consider if your development project is affecting these kind of population groups. Then emerging impact areas. So now these could be in terms of equality deprivation. It could be in terms of culture and language, land acquisition, which is a very sensitive concept. And then the resettlement and livelihood planning, which also affects follows this land acquisition period. Then emerging is also this climate change, which we keeps hearing, and the extreme events like heat waves, cyclones, and all of these things happening because of climate change. And then the ecosystem services as well. Then we have the wider impact consideration, where we look up at risk, resilience, and cumulative impacts. So these are basically EIA impact areas. Then moving on to lecture 8, where we again discussed on these impacts. So now your economic impacts can be direct, such as job creation because of a development activity which is happening. It can be indirect, that is, it is reflected in the GDP of the country where the development is happening. Or it could also have a multiplier impact where multiple things contribute and leads to a positive outcome or a negative outcome. So these are economic impacts. Then social impacts, anything which affects the quality of life, well-being, community participation, human rights, and environmental justice, and any changes in demographics. These are examples of what social impacts incorporate. Then health and safety leads to this health impact assessment, the health of the receiving communities, and the adaptive capacity. So both positive and negative health effects are monitored in the health and safety part of the EIA. Then emerging impacts, as we have already looked up at, we discussed are all of these which were mentioned. Then, on a scale of, so the World Economic Forum looked up at the impacts in terms of the likelihood of the impact being happening. So on the x-axis, you have the likelihood, and on the y-axis, you have the impact. So areas like economic impacts have a low impact, uh, but they have a low likelihood of happening uh, as well. But the likelihood of environmental impacts and their impact is also very significant. So you can read the different look up at impacts in terms of their severity versus the likelihood of them happening to the scale. So this is how you consider the wider impact consideration. Then you have cumulative impacts. So these are impacts where certain more activities or more kind of things are generating combined effect, leading to a cumulative impact. A lot of things are contributing towards the impact. So this could be time crowding, where like activities, two or more activities are happening at the same time. So for example, you have drilling and you have excavating happening at the same time. So you have vibrations and you have the soil destabilization, which is happening at the same time. So together it can lead to your soil being like landslides and these kind of situations. So activities which are uh, planned together and they are contributing to combined effects. So those are time crowded activities. Then you have space crowded activities where different type of activities like factories or power plants are together and they have different kind of impacts, but they're all happening in the same geographical area. So they are space crowded effects, like different activities which are happening together because of the spaces in which they are happening are clubbed together. Then you have synergistic effects and you also have nibbling. So nibbling is basically habitat fragmentation. So you have different, so for example, the development of a road bifurcates, you develop a road, let's say through a biodiversity sensitive area. Now that road over the time period, it will lead to habitat fragmentation. Like you will have zone A and zone B on one side of the road and the other side of the road. And this will also restrict the movement of animals in these affect the biodiversity and the movement of animals and all of those things. So these are again combined effects which are happening because of one activity. So this is lecture 8. Now moving on to lecture 9, we looked up at AIA origins in the United States of America and the worldwide development. So we looked up at how AIA evolved, the scope, limitations, and challenges of it. We looked up at AIA in the USA, so different conventions which happened and different principles and different agencies which moved the process of EIA, because all of these impact assessments and things started happening in the developed world before it started happening in the developing countries. So EIA in US is being discussed from that perspective because it laid the foundation of EIA in India. Then we looked up at current state of EIA worldwide and how different countries and what kind of events have led to EIA being a significant regulatory consideration in different countries. Then we also looked up at factors which influence the EIA system. So you have the political system, you have environmental status, international conventions which the countries sign up to. Then you also have civil rights, the culture of public participation, and the influence of EIA system in each country. So these are things which influence the EIA systems and the EIA policies in a particular country. So these are factors which affect it. Then we also have international organization which played roles in the EIA development over the world. So you have the ESPO Convention of 1991, the Equator Principles, Environmental and Social Procedures by EBRD, Asian Development Bank and the African Development Bank, and the World Bank also. So all of these different agencies have also played a major role in EIA being a norm today. So again, from an examination point of perspective, you should know the major aim of all of these organizations and all of these events, like what was the main aim of the ESPO convention and what was the year in which this happened. So those kind of things you should know, like which agency and what is their aim and what was the year of their establishment. So these are two things which you should focus on from an examination point of perspective. So moving on to lecture 10, we looked up at environmental impact assessment in India, and we will further look up at India mostly. So significant events which played up a role in EIA coming to India was the Chipko movement of 1973. Then we had the Silent Valley movement. We had the Narmada Bachao Andolan of 1985. We have the Tehri project, the Chilika Bachao Andolan. So all of these are significant impacts, the significant events which led to EIA being considered today in India. So now, for the screening process in EIA, where we look up at whether this project requires an EIA, you have certain agencies from which you need approvals, or from which you need the uh, let's say the statement that EIA is required for your project or not. So these agencies are the Ministry of Environment and Forests. You have the Department of Environment, which is again governed by your state government. Then you have, so in the Ministry of Environment and Forest, you have the Impact Assessment Division, which looks up at the impacts of the development project on any nearby any nearby forest area or any nearby ecologically sensitive zones. Then you also have the CPCB, the Central Pollution Control Board, which looks up at air and water both. So their permission is also needed. So the Central Pollution Control Board is the main body, but you also have the State Pollution Control Board, which is again directly linked to the central pollution, but you need the State Pollution Control Board also to give you an okay on whether this project requires an EIA or not. So these are organizations which play an important role in the EIA process, in the EIA screening process. Then, so before for the environmental clearance process in India, you have first, the proponent initiates the proposal, that is the developer or the constructor. They initiate the process, that is they submit their application to the State Pollution Control Board, the SPCB, for the no objection certificate under the Air and Water Act. So the State Pollution Control Board, it gives you this no objection certificate, NOC, that your project does not cause any air and water pollution related activity. Um, that any development in this development site will not contribute to air and water pollution. So they gave you a clearance. If they give you a clearance, you can move forward. That is, the NOC is granted, you can move forward. If this NOC is not granted, you have to change your site. Then you also need site clearance from the Ministry of Environment and Forest if it is required. That is, if your area is in the near the forest area or an ecologically sensitive spot. So then you need clearance from the Ministry of Environment and Forest as well. So they give you clearance. If they give you clearance, you can move forward. Otherwise, you have to change your site because your area is close to this area and your impacts are going to affect the nearby ecologically sensitive zone. Then you also need an no objection certificate from the state forest department or the airport authority, because development activities near the airport also affects your the lead to air pollution and other things which can affect the functioning of airport authority as well. So you need their clearance as well if it is required. So if it is given to you, you can move forward. Otherwise, you again have to change your site. So these are three major bodies from which you need the clearance. Um, then after, if the clearance is given to all of these three agencies, you can then submit an application to the Ministry of Environment and Forest along with their no objection certificates. You then do the environmental impact assessment, the planning plan, environment management plan EMP, the risk analysis for environment clearance. So then you submit this application and the EIA report. So then the Ministry of Environment and Forest, it orders the State Pollution Control Board to conduct a public hearing. So now again, public participation is involved at this stage. So they conduct a public hearing. They hear the comments of the different stakeholders which are involved and their opinions and grievances towards this development project. And they give this impact assessment division then reviews your application based on these compiled comments as well as your application which is submitted by the contractor or developer along with the NOCs which you have. And then after that, if your project is accepted, the environment clearance is given. Otherwise, if it is not given, you have to resubmit with mitigation measures and further risk analysis. And considering these comments which were given, you need to revise your reports. The committee will also give you certain feedback on why this was not given the environment clearance for building, and then you need to include them and resubmit, and then the environment clearance will be given. So this process is done for getting the environment clearance done, and then monitoring is further done by the SPCB, whether whatever was specified is being mentioned. So this is the
Excuse me.
environment clearance process first.
e-
From
Excuse me,
We
ma'am.
have a yes,
Yeah, good evening. So
yeah,
may I ask you a question in this, or it will be taken
yes,
up
yes.
later? Yeah, ma'am, I
No, no,
just
you can
want to
ask
know.
a question. Yeah,
Yeah, this is Manisha. And
yeah, yeah,
I just want to know that you said NOC, the
yeah.
application for NOC, then is for clearance from MOEF, then it is from Forest
Mm.
Department. Like, I want to know
Yes, yes.
whether it is done simultaneously or it is step by step process. Like, first we have to
No,
do
no, it can be done simultaneously because all of these three authorities are different. They look up at different parts of the process, and you need clearance. Like you need the clearance from CPCB definitely, the SPCB, which is your State Pollution Control Board. But if your area is affecting the forest or it's near the forest site or an ecologically
So
sensitive area, then
after doing all these three things, then only
yeah,
we are ready with our EIA report.
yeah. So this is the first step where you get environment clearance for building. So you
Okay.
get clearance from all of these different authorities, then you have to do AIA. So the next step would be AIA, but first you do a basic preliminary
Okay.
analysis
And
that your project is going to have this
after
much.
yeah, after EIA, then we I guess apply for NOC, or NOC is done prior. I have confusion in
It
this.
is done prior. It is done prior to your EIA. So this is the environmental clearance process. So you get clearance from the agencies which are involved in giving you EIA. And this is the first step basically before you even do AIA.
Fine. Thank you so
This
much.
okay. So because in EIA you have other steps as well, which we will further look up because whether the project requires EIA or not is also determined on the type of project, the kind of project. We will look up at them in with examples also further down the different weeks content. But this is the first step where you get clearances from the agencies that you can do development in this area. Because if you can't do development, you have to change site. So all of these three steps are basically that your site is okay. You can do development in the site and your activities are not going to affect the environment in any significant way. And then we see whether EIA is required or not, and we hear from the different stakeholders whether they should be given clearance or not. So next we look up at the India AIA process. So first we have this proposal which we identify. We have the screening process. So in the screening we give a basic summary of what the project is, what are the development activities which are going to happen, what is the site built up area, and then we look up at the norms of the uh, for the EIA in India, and there are different project types and project categories where we look up where EIA is required or not. So certain projects based on their built up area do not even require EIA. But if their activities are different, then you need to do an EIA. So this we determine from the initial environmental examination whether this project requires an EIA or not. So that's the first step, the screening. Then we do scoping where we look up at the different impacts which this development can have on. So if you don't need an EIA, you can just submit a report saying this EIA is not required for your process, and you can do for your proposal, and then you can do the building activities as it is. But if EIA is required, then you identify the kind of impacts which are going to happen. If you remember the categories in which we looked up at impacts, so you identify these impacts on land, air, water, soil, biodiversity, communities, tribal areas, all of these impacts you identify. Then you give a strategy for mitigating these impacts, that is minimizing or reducing the effect of these impacts on all of these different environmental parameters. And then you compile all of these statements and your development plan into an EIA report, which is then again reviewed by the different agencies. And at the scoping, if the screening and scoping, you also have the public involvement at different points, whether these so you have consultations with them in terms of whatever impacts or the mitigation assessment you are doing, is it relevant, are they satisfied with this? So they have these public involvement and consultation with them. They will look up at the type of public involvement and consultation also further down. So you have the public involvement. Then this report is being reviewed by the different agencies. Then a decision is being made whether, if the report is approved, you can go forward with your development activities, and the auditing process and monitoring will happen later on. But if this report is not accepted by the expert, you have to do, they will again give you some feedback on why certain measures need to be included further and things like that. So if it is not approved, you then do a redesign and you basically resubmit this report again, which is then again reviewed. So this is the just a general overview of how EIA process moves about in India. We would see all of these different steps in the different weeks. So now further down, different weeks consider different. So week 3 will mostly be on scoping. Week 4 will be on the impact assessment and things. So you will see all of these things come up much in detail and how they are applied in real type projects as well. This is just an overview of what happens in the process. Okay, so I think we had a few questions in the very beginning. Just go back to the chart. So we have a question, okay, when will we have to submit the assignment month? So in the portal, you have the deadline mentioned along with the assignment on the top right corner. I think the deadline is 7th of February, if I'm not wrong. Uh, So yeah, okay. Then second question is, will we get recorded lectures? Uh, I don't understand what you mean by recorded lectures. Aishwarya, if you are still in the chat, you can just unmute and uh, please clarify what you mean by recorded lectures. Okay. If by recorded lectures you mean the videos which are already there, they are already there, what Harshit ma'am teaches. The problem solving sessions are also being put in the YouTube, and we also share the links to both these presentation slides as well as the YouTube video for each of the different weeks, both for my session as well as the Tuesday session. So these you can access directly from, so on your left hand side, you have the different options, the different week content. So you have a problem solving sessions tab. If you go on that, you can get the links for each of the weeks. Recorded lectures which we are doing here, the problem solving sessions along with these slides from which we go through. Okay, I hope that answers your question. If not, you can just unmute and ask again. Okay, so do we have any other questions so far? You can just unmute and ask. I see, Anubhav, you have your hand raised.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Anubhav.
Ma'am, actually, ma'am, whether we have our examination on online or offline.
Yes, so the examination will be online only. And I will, I had these queries. I heard a lot of you have these queries in the discussion forum. The examination will be online and it will be in the form of MCQs mostly. You will have multiple choice questions in which you can have multiple options correct or you can have single options correct. And they will be in the form of the assignment questions which you have seen so far in week one. So you have fill in the blanks also, but the options are given in the ABCD format. So you can select. So it will be multiple choice only. You will have the question type will be similar to what you see in assignments, but it's mostly MCQ.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now let's move on to the question and answers session. So here we look up at the different questions which we have covered in the past, in the previous run of this course. So these are questions based on week two's content. So what you can do is, okay. So the minimum area of a project for EIA depends on the type of project. So the guidelines we will look up at in week three, we will look up at this in much in detail. So different projects have different area requirements for which EIA needs to be done. Again, it depends on the type of activities for which EIA needs to be done. So factories have different areas, and office has different areas, residential has different areas. So it depends on the type of proposal, the type of development for which EIA needs to be done or not. So there's no like minimum criteria for uh, all the constructions. It's for every, it depends on the type of proposal and the building type basically. Okay. So what you can do in this session now, you can, do we have the assessment questions? What do you mean by assessment questions? What do you mean by assessment questions, Shubhash? You can just unmute and ask. Weekly assessments. Oh, so weekly assignment questions. So since the deadline for that weekly assignment for week two has not passed, I can't discuss those questions with you right now. But once these assignment deadline has passed, you can also see the options then. But we will also discuss why those are the correct answers. So once the deadline has passed, you can see these scores for your the assignments. Okay, you joined today. So did week one assignment deadline pass? So I think as far as I know, week one and week two both have a deadline of 7th of February. So you still have time to fill in your assignment problems. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So now what you can do is you can post the answers for the questions in the chat box, and we will then look up at what the correct answer is. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the questions. Okay, so what is the title of the Brundtland report which was published in 1987? A, our environment, B, our common future, C, sustainable development, or D, our one planned earth. So again, these are questions based on whatever was discussed until week 2. Okay, so now this is one of the significant reports which was published in 1987, and this was the report which stated or termed sustainable development. So okay, we have an answer B. We also have an answer C. Even though the term sustainable development or sustainability was defined in this report, the title of this report is still Our Common Future. So it defined sustainability, but the title of this report is Our Common Future. And it defines sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs or meet their own requirements. This is the most quoted definition of sustainability, and this was defined in 1987 in the significant report by the World Commission. Okay, so the correct answer is B, our common future. Again, books or reports which are significant in terms of the towards environment impact assessment are again relevant from the examination point of view, and what years they were published. And again, same for the laws and things which we will look up in the different weeks which are coming further. So again, what year and what was their main objective. Okay, so B is the correct answer. So moving on to question 2, when was environmental impact assessment made mandatory in India as per the Environmental Protection Act of 1986? Was it in the year A 1994? Was it year B 1984? Was it year C 1986? Or was it year D 1987? Okay, so we have a lot of A's coming in. We also have a C. Okay. So EIA was made mandatory in 1994. So on 27 January 1994, the Union Ministry of India, the Union Ministry of Environment and Forest, the MEF, under the Government of India and under the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, they passed this EIA notification making environmental clearance mandatory for expansion or modernization of any activity or for setting up new projects, which are listed in Schedule 1 of the notification. So Schedule 1 is basically where different type of project types and project areas are defined, which says which project requires environment clearance or EIA in it. And since then, there have been 12 amendment made in EIA since the notification in 1994. So EIA was made mandatory in the year 1994. And under that also we made environment clearance mandatory for both expanding or modernizing any already built up construction, and definitely for the new projects which are further coming up. So it was year 1994. So A is the correct answer. So moving on to question 3, what does IAIA in the context of EIA stands for? So is it A, International Assembly for Impact Assessment, B, Indian Assembly for Impact Assessment, C, International Association for Impact Assessment, or D, Indian Association for Impact Assessment? So what is the full form of IAIA? So again, this is one of the agencies which has defined the leading definition of EIA. Okay, so we have C. We have an option C in the answers. Okay, another C. Okay. Okay, so the correct answer is C, that is the IAIA stands for International Association for Impact Assessment. And this is the leading global network on the best practices in the use of environmental assessment for making informed decisions regarding the policies, programs, plans, and projects. And they bring researchers, practitioners, and different type of people who are interested in impact assessment from all over the world. So this is the agency which has works towards environmental impact assessment. So IAIA is International Association for Impact Assessment. So C is the correct answer. Okay, so moving on to question 4. So EIA is a systematic process which involves a number of steps. Order the following. So you have to tell which option uh, states them in the correct order, starting from the beginning towards the end. So option A is scoping, screening, impact prediction, and then review. Option B is impact prediction, screening, scoping, and then review. Option C is screening, scoping, review, and impact prediction. And option D is screening, scoping, impact prediction, and reviewing. Okay, so we have a few Ds, a lot of Ds. Okay, so D is the correct answer. So first we have this screening where we say whether this project requires an EIA or not. Then we look up at the scoping, that is what type of impacts and what type of issues should be considered in the EIA. Then we have the impact prediction where we see what type of impacts in different categories, severity, they're renewable or the significant, long-term, short-term. We look up at these impact predictions and then we do a review of the EIA. So the correct order is screening, then scoping, followed by impact prediction, and then review. So D is the correct answer, like most of you said. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So, which of the following is covered under biophysical environmental impact? So, is it A, health, B, culture, C, air, or D, language? So, we looked up at the different type of impact areas and we looked up at all of these different impact areas. So, under the biophysical impact area, which of the followings is considered? Okay, so we have A, health. Okay, we have two options saying health. Okay, so biophysical basically means the biologically physical or the biological sensible things which you can see and feel. So it includes air, soil, land, geology, flora, fauna, biodiversity, water, noise, transportation, landscape, and visual. So the correct answer, so air is considered under the biophysical environmental space. So all of these natural environmental areas are basically considered in the biophysical impact. So anything which is directly perceivable and directly biologically you can see and feel. So C, air is the correct answer. Okay, so moving on to question 6. So this is a match the typology of the environmental impact of group A with the characteristics of the impact in group B. So we have the different type of impacts being mentioned in group A and the examples given in group B. So you can match them and give the order in the matching. Okay, so we have somebody saying B. Okay, let's see. Let's wait for a few more answers. So you have to be very thorough in the match the following because one wrong answer can lead to sort of cutting of your marks. So be a little careful when you match the followings because you have four different things being asked in the same question. Okay, we have another B. Wait for a few more answers. Okay. I'm not sure if there's negative marking in the exam. Uh, I will confirm and I will let you know in the next week's content in the next week's problem solving session. But in the assignments, how you are marked is basically if you have four options and if you match two of them. So in this case, you have to match the correct order only. So only then you get the correct answer. Right. So it's the same answer. Okay. So we have a A also in the answers. Okay, so the correct answer is B. That is direct impact is when you have direct discharge of waste water into the river, leading to the deterioration of water quality. So this is a direct impact where directly the waste is being discharged into the river. So P matches with 3. Then we have an indirect impact, which is the deterioration of water quality, which leads to health impact. So your health is also being impacted because of this deterioration of water quality, because of this discharge in the river water. So this is an indirect effect on your health. So Q matches with 4. Then we have reversible impact, that is cutting of trees in the project area. This is a reversible impact. You can put the same number of trees or saplings in a new project area. Now this is reversible. You can make up for it over the years by the like it's a reversible impact. Whereas irreversible impact is something like the extinction of species, where if a species is lost, you don't have any other members of the species present, you can't lead to the creation of that species again. So this is an irreversible impact. So P matches with 3, Q matches with 4, R matches with 1, and S matches with 2 is the correct order. So B is the correct answer. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So following aspects are covered under soil, land, and geology. One, land use change. Second, soil availability and quality. Third, geological destination designations, geological resources, and geological formations. And four, all of the above. So is it A, 1 and 2 only? Is it B, 1 and 3 only? Is it C, 2 and 3 only? Or is it D, 4? So which of the aspects which are mentioned from 1 to 4 are being considered in soil, land, and geology when we try to determine the impacts on soil, land, and geology? Okay, so we have an answer D. Okay, so D is the correct answer. So all of the so land use change is also considered in the soil, land, and geology. We have the soil availability and the quality of soil, which we consider. Then we have geological designations, what resources are present in that particular geological area, and the geological formation, the type of uh, rocks which are present, and how construction activities are going to be affected by this. So all of these three are considered in soil, land, and geology. So for all of the above is the correct answer. So moving on to the next question. So select the following aspects to assess the impacts on soil. 1, soil contamination and erosion. 2, soil compaction. 3, soil sealing. And 4, all of the above. So is it A, 1 and 3 only? B, 2 and 3 only? C, 1 only? And D, 4? So which of the following aspects which are mentioned in 1 to 4 are used for assessing the impact on soil? Okay, so we have an answer D. Okay, we have another answer D. Okay, so D is the correct answer. All of these are considered when we assess the impact on the soil. So contamination and erosion, which happens because of cutting of trees and the different materials being mixed in the soil. Then soil compaction and soil sealing. So all of these are impacts which we consider. So for all of the above is the correct answer. So moving on to the next question. So again, it's a match the following. So match the thematic impacts of group A with the examples in group B. So in group A, we have again impact, so economic impact, social impact, and health impact. And then in group B, we have the different categories or descriptions for all of these impacts. So you need to match them correctly. Okay. So, and then you need to give me the order for what matches with what. Okay. So we have a few A and a few C's in the options. So the correct answer is A. So for economic impact deals with anything which leads to the creation of economic value or the generation of wealth. So this could be done by the job creations at different levels because of a project being proposed. So that's an economic effect. Um, Economic impact. So P matches with 2, that is job creations at different levels. Again, all of these job creations will lead towards the development of the GDP, improving the GDP, the GNP as well. Then social impacts is anything which deals with the quality of life and well-being of the different communities and the different people, stakeholders which are associated with that particular project or which are impacted by that particular project. So social impact matches with three, that is quality of life and well-being. Then health impact is anything which directly or indirectly affects the health of the stakeholders or communities which are going to be affected by the development process. So our health impact matches with the health of the receiving community and adaptive capacity. So R matches with 1. So the correct order is P2, Q3, and R1. So A is the correct answer. So moving on to the next question. So it's again a match the following. So you need to match the themes in group A with their description in group B. So what do these terms mitigation and adaptation mean in terms of the project impacts? So you have their characteristics being mentioned in group B. Okay, so we have an answer A. We have another A. Okay, a lot of A's. Okay, another A. Okay, so A is the correct answer. So mitigation is anything which deals with solving the or minimizing the impacts, the effects of the impacts being felt by the different environmental categories because of the development process. So mitigation could be something like minimizing a project's greenhouse gas emissions. There's a spelling mistake here. I apologize for that. Then adaptation is anything which you do to adapt your process, your project or your built area such that it is resilient to future conditions or to future to the current scenario. So adaptation could be anything like building or developing the resilience of the project to climate change, which is a significant issue which we are going to face in the coming years. So adaptation is the resilience of the project to climate change. Okay, so P matches with 2 and Q matches with 1. So A is the correct answer, like all of you said. Okay, so moving on to the next question. State true or false. Resilience is about being protective rather than developing the ability to deal and cope with abrupt changes. So is this statement true or false? So we have an answer B. Okay. Okay, we have another B. Okay, we have a lot of B's. Okay, so B is the correct answer. Resilience is not about being protective. It's about developing the ability to deal and cope with abrupt changes, such as the climate change. You have to build climate resilient buildings, climate change resilient buildings. So resilience is when you have developed this ability to deal and cope with abrupt changes. Like, okay, so the statement given in the question is false. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So again, match the following. So you need to match the cumulative impact categories mentioned in Group A with their description in Group B. So we have the different type of cumulative impacts being mentioned in Group A and their definitions or description mentioned in Group B. And you need to match them in the correct order. So we also discussed them in the highlights when we looked up at the different type of impacts, AIA impacts in lecture 7 and lecture 8. So we have an answer C. We have another C. Okay, let's wait for a few more people to respond. Okay, so the correct answer is C. So time crowded is when an activity, when impacts are so close in time that the effect of one are not dissipated before the next one occurs. That is when your impact of one activity has not finished and the impact of another activity is being felt in time. That is, two or more activities which are happening almost simultaneously or almost at a few times time difference, then their impacts are being felt together because of this overlapping time. So these are cumulative effects because of time crowding. So P matches with 4. So if you see in the image again, that drilling and the excavating example, then space crowding is when the impacts of various activities are placed too closely spatially placed. That is, different activities are generating different kind of impacts, but they are geologically closely placed, so you feel them together because of this proximity in location or space. So these are space crowded effects when the effects are being felt because of this closeness of space. So Q matches with 1. Then nibbling is this incremental erosion of a resource till there's a significant change or they are completely used up. So this development of different type of habitats is an example. Then we also have so R matches with 2. Then we have synergistic cumulative impacts, which are the different when different type of impacts they interact to produce qualitatively and quantitatively different impacts. So in quality and quantity, these impacts differ, but because they are happening at the same time, they are going to have a cumulative impact, which you feel. So S matches with 3. So P matches with 4, Q matches with 1, and R matches with 2, and S matches with 3 is the correct answer. So moving on to the next question. So the population bomb in 1968, which warned of the dangers of overpopulation such as mass starvation, societal problems, environmental deterioration, was written by A. Paul Ehrlich, B. Rachel Carlson, C. Michelle Pollan, or D. Paul Hawken. So who wrote the book Population Bomb in 1968? This book talked about overpopulation and how it's going to lead to all of these different impacts, like starving problem, the societal problems, theft, and all of these things happening, and environmental deterioration. Okay, so we're getting a lot of A's in the answer. Okay. Okay, so A is the correct answer. This book, Population Control or Race to Oblivion, the Population Bomb. So this was written by Dr. Paul R. Ehrlich. So A is the correct answer. So moving on to question 14. The Cuyahoga River incident in Ohio, US in 1969 is known for A, fire because of increased sedimentation, B, fire because of pollution of the river, C, because of water sports, or D, because of flood. So what does this particular incident which happened in US, uh, what was the cause of the Cuyahoga River incident? Okay, so this is an incident which happened because the river caught fire because of pollution. So in 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, it became so polluted that it caught fire. And this fire again led to this movement towards the Clean Water Act and the Green Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And this was this by bringing the national attention to water pollution issues. This incident was one of the events which led to the creation of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, or the so the EPA was formed because of this incident which happened, and to maintain the quality of environmental resources. So again, this incident is significant, and this was caused because the river was so polluted that it caught fire. Okay, so B is the correct answer. So moving on to the next question. So as per the court ruling, what is true about the case of Calvert Cliffs Coordinating Committee, Inc. et al., which are who are the petitioners, versus the United States Atomic Energy Commission and the United States of America, who are the respondents of 1971. So, A, the procedure adopted by Calvert-Cliffs Coordinating Committee failed to comply as per the policy of NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Agency. Then B, procedure adopted by Calvert-Cliffs Coordinating Committee complied with NEPA. C, procedure adopted by Atomic Energy Commission failed to comply as per the policy of NEPA. Or D, the procedure adopted by Atomic Energy Commission complied with NEPA. So we have an answer D. So this is based on a court case which happened in the United States. So the petitioners or the people uh, who put forward this case was the Calvert's Cliff Coordinating Committee, and the respondents, that is the people who have to respond to this, were the United States Atomic Energy Commission and the USA government. So this was because the procedure which was adopted by the Atomic Energy Commission, it failed to comply as per the policy of the uh, uh, National Environment Protection Agency. So, because the Atomic Energy Commission did not comply with the policy for environmental protection, they put this case on the Atomic Energy Commission, US Atomic Energy Commission, and the USA government. Okay, so this is again one of the significant cases. So you need to know what was the cause and what was the year in which this happened, the different events which have happened. Okay, from an examination point of view. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So the keynote address of the then PM Indira Gandhi of then PM of India Indira Gandhi at United Nations Conference on Human Environment, the UNCHE, which was held in Stockholm in the year dash. So you need to fill in the blanks. That is, in what year did the Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi gave the keynote address at the UNCHE? Is it A, year 1965, B, year 1972, C, year 1980, or D, year 1985? Okay, so we have an answer B. Okay, we have another B. Okay, so B is the correct answer. So the then Indian PM Indira Gandhi, she gave this she gave her keynote address in the United Nations Conference on Human Environment, which was held in Stockholm in the year of 1972. So B is the correct answer. Moving on to the next question. So this is a straight true or false. So in India, screening for AIA is done on the basis of a defined list, which provides the types and threshold values of the size of the project. Is the statement true or false? Okay, so we have an answer A. Okay, so this is again what we discussed. Another A. Okay, another A. We have mostly A's. So the statement is true. So screening in India is again done on this defined list, which is the schedule, which gives you the different typologies of the project, that is residential, commercial, factories, the different kind of factories, whether it's a metal factory or uh, uh, a textile factory, different kind of. So it gives you these different types of uh, projects and the threshold values for the size of the project. That is what built up area for what built up area EIA from what built up area the EIA needs to be done. So this statement is true, and this is during the screening process as well. So A, true is the correct answer. We will look up at this in the next week. Next to next week. I think next week we discuss history. Moving on to the next question. So it's again state true or false. The Central Pollution Control Board, the CPCB, serves as a field formation and also provides technical services to the Ministry of Environment and Forest of the provisions of the Environment Protection Act of 1986. So is this statement true or false? Okay, so we have answers A. Okay, we have mostly A's. Yes, so the statement is true. So CPCB gives looks up after both water and air pollution, but it also serves as a technic. It also gives technical services to the Ministry of Environment and Forest for the provision under the provisions of the Environment Protection Act of 1986. So the statement is true. So moving on to the next question. So find the correct match of the following pairs of drivers and pressures which are relevant to the marine environment. So is it A, direct drivers, tourism, shipping, agriculture. B, indirect drivers, food, construction, recreation, and energy. C, principal drivers, population growth, urbanization, economic development, climate change. So you need to find the correct match of the pairs of drivers and pressures. That is, which of A, B, C are correct. So in the options we have A, which is only A. We have only A and B, only B and C, and all three A, B, and C. So again, this is from the marine environment, which we discussed in week one. These are the drivers, and these are the pressures which are being felt by the marine environment because of these drivers. Okay, so D is the correct answer. So direct drivers. So from a marine environment perspective, direct drivers are tourism activities which are happening. Then you also have shipping and agriculture. So all of these three categories are direct drivers, which direct drivers and the pressures which are being felt. Then indirect drivers are food, construction, recreation, and energy generation. So these are indirect drivers. Then principal drivers, as we have seen, are population growth, urbanization, economic development, climate change. So all of these four are the principal drivers which drive the marine environment. Uh, okay, so D, all three A, B, and C are the correct answer. So moving on to the next question. So complete the following diagram of economic development process in its environmental context. So we have missing values for A, B, and C. So we you need to fill what is A, B, and C. So we discussed this economic development process uh, in the environmental context from bolding. So what is A, B, and C? The options are A, input, B, economy, C, resource depletion, which is option A. Then option B is A, sustainable use of resources, B, input, C, economy. Option C is A, resource management, B, economy, and C, input. And option D is A, input, B, economy, and C, biosphere. Okay. Okay, so the correct answer is A. So we have inputs, which lead to both economy as well as outputs, which contribute towards your gross national product. Then any input and output process has waste generation, which leads to your environmental pollution and anything which affects our environment again. And these inputs are also directly sourced from the environment. So there's a resource depletion which happens. So A is inputs, B is economy, and C is the source depletion. So A is the correct answer. So again, diagrams and these processes and what process happens after what is something which you should know and try to remember. Okay, so A is the correct answer. Moving on to the next question. So when was AIA made mandatory across India under the Environmental Protection Act? We have already looked up at this previously. So again, this is a revision question. So A, 1969, B, 1976, C, 1986, and D, 1994. Okay, so we are getting a lot of Ds. Okay, so D is the correct answer. We've already looked up at this. Okay, moving on to the next question. So, which of the following is covered under the biophysical environmental impact? So, this is a multi-choice question. More than one options can be correct. So, A, landscape and visual, B, soil, land and geology, C, water, and D, language. So, again, a revision question because we have already looked up at the different impact areas. Okay, we have A, B, and C. We looked up at these different impact areas under the biophysical impacts. Okay, another A, B, and C, another A, B, and C. Okay, so A, B, and C are the correct answers. So biophysical impacts includes anything which you can biologically and physically sense. So we have air, soil, land, geology, flora, fauna, biodiversity, water, noise, transportation, landscape, and visual. So both all the options A, B, and C correspond to biophysical impacts. Most of you answered it correctly. Moving on to the next question. So, under the biophysical environmental impact of air, which one of the following are the key air pollutants? A. Nitrogen oxides. B. Ground level ozone. C. Stratospheric ozone. Or and D. Particulate matter. I think this is also a multi-choice question, so more than one options can be correct. Okay, so we have an answer A, B, and D. Okay, we have another A, B, and D. Okay, another A, B, and D. Okay, so the correct answer is A, B, and D. Again, from week's one revision content. So key air pollutants are nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, both PM2.5 and PM. And then ground level ozone. That stratospheric ozone protects us from the sun's ultraviolet rays. Okay, so A, B, and D are the correct answers. So moving on to the next question. In India, when was the right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation, and resettlement act came into existence? That is, which year was this act passed? So was it year 2013, was it 2014, 2015, or 2016? Okay, we will look up at this act further down in the other weeks when we look up at land acquisition and rehabilitation practices and how EIA is done in such a scenario. Okay, we have an option A. Okay, another A. Okay, so yes, so A is the correct answer. So the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act, it was passed in India in the year 2013. So under this act, we have practices for compensation value and the transparency being maintained in this process when a land acquisition is being done and when people are being rehabilitated and resettled in a different location. So during that period, the compensation practices and the different other guidelines are being mentioned in this act, which is used in EIA when such a scenario, such a situation arises. So this was in year 2013. So A is the correct answer. Moving on to the next question. So complete the following diagram of global stresses. So you again need to tell what A, B, C, and D are. Now this is again the World Economic Forum scale of the impact severity and the likelihood of the impact being happening. So you can determine the type of impact category based on the type of impacts which are listed under the different uh, notations. And you can also assess them based on the impact and likelihood of them happening. Okay, so we have an option A, another A. Okay, we have a lot of A's coming in. Okay, so A is the correct answer. So in these societal stresses, we have water crisis, flood crisis, large scale involuntary migration, spread of infectious diseases. So the impacts or severity of these stresses are much higher, whereas the likelihood of them happening is much lower. Then B is environmental stressors like the extreme weather events, natural disaster, climate change, biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and man-made environmental disasters. So these are impacts which have over the years have a higher impact, but their likelihood has also increased, as you will see by the extreme weather events happening across the at a global level happening so frequently. Then for geopolitical D, we have the interstate conflict, failure of national, regional, local governance, terrorist attacks, state collapses or crisis. So these they have moderate impact, but their likelihood is also being moderate. Again, these depends on the geopolitical situations between the different countries. So you also keep hearing about the geopolitical state of wars which are happening and the different state collapses and crises which are happening because of the country level politics. and geological positioning of those countries. Then, under the economic stresses, we have fiscal crisis, profound social instability, under unemployment, failure of critical infrastructure, asset bubbles in a major economy, energy price shock, failure of financial mechanism or institutions, deflation and unmanaged inflation. So these are economic stresses, but their impact is mild or medium, but their likelihood is also lesser because of the practices which we have around the economic policies. So the correct answers: A, societal; B, environmental; C, economic; and D, geopolitical. Okay, so A is the correct answer, like most of you said. Moving on to the next question. So, in the ESPO EIA convention, what are the major obligations of parties? Is it A, to assess the environmental impact of certain activity at an early stage of planning? B, general obligation of states to notify and consult each other on all major projects under the considerations that are likely to have a significant adverse environmental impact across boundaries? So, which of the statements A and B is correct? Is it only A, only B, only both A and B, or none of the above? Okay, so we have a lot of C's in the answers. Okay, so C is the correct answer. Both of these statements are the major obligations which the signatories of the ESPO Convention have to ensure. So they have to assess the environmental impact of activities at an early stage of planning, and then they also need to notify and consult on all major projects under consideration which have a significant environmental impact across boundaries. Okay, so both A and B are the correct answers. So moving on to next question. So as per the timeline of the EIA evolution across globe, what were the major milestones during 1990s? So again, this is a multi-choice question. So is it A, increased use of GIS? So more than one options can be correct. So increased use of geoinformation services, GIS, and other information technologies. B, India also adopted the EIA formally in the 1990s, so 1990 to 2000, that decade year. EIA was introduced by NEPA in US, and the use of EIA by developing countries like Brazil, Philippines, China, and Indonesia. Okay, so which of these major activities happened during the 1990s? Okay, so we have A, C, and D. One of the options says A, C, and D. We have another saying A, C, and D. Okay, so the correct answer is A and B only. Uh, so we have and in the 1990s, we had the increased use of GIS and other information technologies. We also had India who adopted EIA formally in the year of 1994. Then both of these other options did not happen in the 1990s. Then other things which happened in 1990s were the requirement to consider the transboundary effects under the ESPO Convention, increase sustainability principles and global issues which received increased attention, the formulation of EA legislation by many developing countries, but the developing countries which are mentioned here did not sign it in the year of 1990s, like in the decade of 1990s, and the rapid growth in the environment assessment training which was happening at that point. Okay, so A and B are the correct answers. So again, significant effects or the events which happen in different years are important. Okay, so moving on. So what are the various contextual factors influencing the EIA system? A, political system; B, environmental system; C, international convention; D, civil rights. So which of the A, B, C, and D are the factors which influence EIA systems in countries? Okay, we have an option D. We have another D. Okay, we have a lot of Ds. Okay, so the correct answer is D. So factors which influence the EIA system are political system, option A; environmental status, option B; international conventions like the ESPO Convention, option C; civil rights movements, option D. We also have the culture of public participation and the influence of EIA in each of the countries. So these are all contextual factors which influence the EIA system. So D, all of the above is the correct answer. Okay, so moving on. State true or false? The late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said the environmental problems of developing countries are not the side effects of excessive industrialization, but reflect the inadequacy of development. The rich countries may look upon development as a cause of environmental destruction, but to us, it is one of the primary means of improving the environment for living or providing food, water, sanitation, and shelter, of making the desert green and the mountains habitable. So, did the late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said this statement or not? Okay, so we have a lot of answers saying this statement is true. So, the statement is true. This was the statement she made in the UNCHE in Sweden. Okay, so moving on. So, the Narmada Bachao Andolan was launched in which year? A 1984, B 1985, C 1986, or D 1987? Okay, in what year was the Narmada Bachao Andolan launched? Okay, so the correct answer is the Narmada Bachao Andolan was launched in the year of 1985. So B is the correct answer. Okay. Moving on, environmental clearance process includes clearance for what of the different clearance from what of the different acts. So A, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974. B, Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981. C, Noise Pollution Regulation and Control Rules of 2000. And D, Hazardous Waste Management and Handling Rules of 1989. Okay, and the options are only A and B are correct. You need clearance from you need clearance under these acts. Option B, which says A, C, and D. Option C says only C and D, and option D says all of the above. Okay, so we have two answers saying D. Okay, so the correct answer is D. That is, you need environmental clearance from all of these different under all of these different acts and rules of these different years. So you need clearance in terms of water, air, and the emissions which you're going to do, then the noise pollution and the noise levels which the activities are going to generate, and the hazardous waste and their management and handling at the site. So all four are correct. Moving on. So this was all the questions which we can cover based on this week's content. So now let's look up at the queries which were asked in this week's forum. And I would request all of you to also make use of the discussion forum or ask a question forum. If you have any queries regarding to the course content or regarding the examination process, you can post them in the discussion forum. And you as participants can also answer those queries if you know the response to those queries. But we will also cover all these queries in these problem solving sessions, both in Saturday as well as in Tuesday session, as well as the TA for the course will also update and answer the queries there. So first of all, we have continuing from week one's problem solving session. So we had few queries regarding will the exam be computer based? Yes, the exam will be computer based, and based on the type of questions, you will have MCQs similar to the assignment questions which we have seen so far. So you have match the following and you have fill in the blanks and the options being given in the MCQ format. So the similar type of questions you can expect in the examination also. So for preparing some exam for examination, you have to go through the course lecture videos as well as the assignment questions. If you go through them, you will mostly be able to answer the questions for the course. In the problem solving sessions also we consider the different questions which were asked in the last year's course, and we try to cover those topics as well. Again, from examination point of view, you should remember the different years in which events have happened, the main aim of laws, policies, and the main objective or activity which triggered the process, the EIA process, especially in India and from the Indian perspective, and definitions and years mostly. Yeah. So these are things around which you can expect questions. Okay. So then we also had a question in the last session regarding do highway development in Uttarakhand cause landslide? We will also cover the highway development and land excavations and things in a different week later towards the later half uh, of the course. So highway development potentially contributes to landslides, especially in hilly areas and mountainous areas. So this is because construction activities can cause deforestation, and the improper land use planning can disturb the natural flow and natural balance of slopes, which can increase the risk of landslides happening. And adequate measures, however, like proper engineering, soil stabilization, and EIA, if it's done meticulously, can help to mitigate these risks. So I believe this question was asked around the Silkyara tunnel collapse, which happened in Uttarakhand last year. And this is because so we don't have a cause for what why this happened, and there was also a trapping of more than I think 40 people inside the tunnel collapse, and rescue activities are happening around it. You would have, if you follow news, you would have definitely came across this, and this is because the digging and this project which is happening is happening in the hills of Himalaya, which is one of the world's youngest mountain range. And what I can decipher is because the geology of Himalayas is very complex, and you have different type of rocks and rocks of different strengths, that the techniques which you use are not designed around all of these things. So again, the environmental system is very complex, and whatever activities or construction mitigation activities or effects you propose are both uh, they are based on past projects and experiments mostly, which have happened in past EIAs. So these are again things which can happen, which is why we do EIA and we give impact assessments. So I think this happened because of the different type of geology and the different type of rocks and strengths which we have. But the potential there's a risk of landslide happening in mountainous regions, and we will look up at how this is tackled in EIA further down in maybe towards week 11 or week 12. We look up at uh, highway projects and construction transportation projects like these. So I hope this answers the question of whoever asked it last time. So since we did not receive any query in week two, let's look up at additional content. Now, this is something which will not come in your examination. This is just for an information purpose, because this deals with the EIA potentials which are happening. Okay, so we have a question by Joe. So how do we know that a question has multiple options or not? So if we answer any one of the two correct answers, will we be awarded a mark or half? Okay, so in questions, you have it will be mentioned whether it's a multi-choice question or a single answer question. First of all, it will be mentioned whether it's a SCQ, single option, a single correct option, or it's a MCQ, multiple option correct option. It will be mentioned in the question in the examination paper. In the assignment questions, if you have like check boxes, that is the square kind of options, you can select multiple options. So that's a multiple choice question. And if you have these round type of options in front of your answers, then it's a single choice question in the assignments. But in the examination, it will be mentioned whether it's a single option correct or whether it's multiple options correct. And if you answer, so if a question has two correct answers, and if you mark half of it correct, or if you mark one answer correct, you will get a half mark for that question. Okay, so I hope this answers your question. Okay, so let's look up at the additional content. So let's look up at the net zero target for India. So in COP26 Glasgow, COP26, which happened in Glasgow in 2021, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the target for India to achieve net zero by 2070. And in the COP27, which happened in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt 2022, India submitted its first long-term strategy for low carbon development, or the LTS. So under this, so this is a report which highlights the the road map for India to achieve net zero and under what activities and things it's going to achieve its net zero target. So under this, this is the report which was submitted by to the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this report was submitted in November of 2022, and it details India's vision and plan of action for achieving its target of net zero emitter by the year of 2070. And it covers all of these different sectors like power, industry, transport, building, and urban sectors, and it tells what sort of activities and things it's going to undertake, but it does not sufficiently give clear policy guidelines on how the government intends to achieve these net zero beyond the current policies and programs which it has right now. It's just a overview sort of report that we're going to cut emissions by this much in different sectors. But policy on a policy level, nothing has been very stringently outlined. Then another development which happened was in the union budget of which was announced in February of 2022 by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. So one of the seven key priorities of the government, which she identified, was green growth, and she laid out a budget of 35,000 crores for priority capital investment towards green energy transition and net zero objectives. So this money was allocated towards funding projects and achieving these net zero objectives. So to quote what the finance minister Nirmala Sitharaman said, she said, "I came to the fifth priority, which is green growth. So Prime Minister has given vision for life or lifestyle for environment, and to spur a movement for environmentally conscious lifestyle, India is moving firmly for the Panchamrit, which is the net zero carbon emission by 2070." To usher in the green industrial and economic transition. And this budget builds on our focus on green growth. So the things which were identified, so, yeah. So things which were identified in this budget was the National Green Hydrogen Mission, which will facilitate the transition from low carbon which will facilitate the transition of economy to low carbon intensity and reduce the dependence on fossil fuels, and their target is to have an annual production of 5 MMT by 2030. Um, then we had the interstate transmission system for evacuation grid integration of 13 gigawatt of renewable energy from Ladakh. And the budget was again 20,700 crores. Then we had the Green Credit Program, which was mentioned in the United Budget. So this is notified under the EPA for responsive actions by individuals and companies to encourage environmental friendly behaviors. So certain credit systems will be allocated for different companies and individuals to help them gain awareness on green practices. Then we had the PM Sanam, which is the PM program for restoration, awareness, nourishment, and amelioration of Mother Earth, under which if, alternative fertilizers and balanced use of chemical fertilizers is going to be promoted. Then we had in terms of Govardhan scheme where circular economy will be promoted. Then there was also a mention of 1 crore farmers facilitated to adopt natural farming practices. Then we had Mishti, which was announced, which was mangrove initiative for shoreline habitat and tangible incomes. We also had Amrit Dharohar scheme for conservation values and to encourage the optimal use of wetlands, enhance ecotourism and income generation for local communities, and coastal shipping being promoted as an energy efficient and lower cost mode of transport through the public participation PPP model. And we had the replacement of old polluting vehicles as an important part of greening the economy. So these are certain activities or things which was highlighted in the union budget of 2023. How much progress has happened in this is something which I have not looked up yet. But these are things which the government has decided and is sort of implementing for the target of net zero emitter in the year of 2017 as per what we promised in COP21. Uh, okay, you can see the previous slides. Okay, so these are certain initiatives which certain sort of development which have been happening in the country towards uh, a sustainable or a net zero emitter target. So again, this is purely from news and what has developed so far. This is something which will not come in your examination. Again, I would like to highlight. This is just for your own understanding and further exploration. Okay, so I think that's all I would like to say. So if you have any queries or if you have any thoughts, any feedback which you would like to give for this course. So PPP is public participation, private and public partnership model. So both private as well as what do you say? Uh, uh, Public and private companies come together. So private companies basically build the public infrastructure, and they get like so for example, for building of let's say these toll plazas, you give that contract to a private company, but this is a public infrastructure which is being developed, and that toll booth is being operated by the private entity for as a form of incentive, and they take the money out of that toll plaza for a certain number of years, and they basically cover their cost by this practice. So it's a public-private partnership. So for building up public projects, you have private companies which are doing the project, but they're the so it's a kind of model and management plan basically where the government doesn't have to pay out the private company directly, but by building these facilities, they can take the payment out of it for a certain number of years, and then they hand over that facility back to the government or to the public sector, which is responsible for handling it. And this public infrastructure is developed. So this is a kind of model through which uh, these kind of activities happen, because if the government has to shell out this much amount of money for each project which is happening, it will uh, empty their balance sheet basically. So they do this kind of model so that they don't have to outfront pay a certain amount of money. Like they don't have to pay the full price, but they give in certain incentives to the private company to gain profit out of it for a certain time period. So that's the PPP model. Okay. Okay. So again, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box or you can unmute. Again, if you have any questions when you're going through the course content, you can put it in the discussion forum or ask a question for them which is there, and we will try to cover them in these problem solving sessions. Okay. Again, if there's any feedback which you like to give on what should be included in these sessions, you can do it now, or you can say it, put it in the discussion forum as well. Yeah, again, the slides for this presentation as well as the recording of this presentation will be put on YouTube, and this PPT will be uploaded in okay. This PPT will be uploaded in the a folder, and both the links will be shared with you. Okay, so we have a question. Do we have to study about the mass extinctions for the exam in detail? So whatever is covered in the presentation, if it's covered in much detail, only that much part is relevant. You don't have to study explicitly about it. Whatever was discussed uh, in the lecture video, only that much is relevant. Anything outside of it is not relevant. So I think we only looked up at the sixth mass extinction in the lecture video. So I think that much is relevant. So only your lecture videos and your assignment questions. If you study from them, you will be fine for the examination. Okay. Okay. So on that note, thank you for joining this problem solving session. And links will be available for the slides and the presentation recording in the problem solving session where you see the week's content. You have a problem solving session tab. So in that tab, you have both the Tuesdays and Saturdays link for whatever weeks we have covered so far. So you have the folder link for this presentation and you have the YouTube link for the recording video. So you can go through them for the questions which we have covered before the exam as well. Okay. Thank you so much. And I think on that note, I would close. Also, please make use of the discussion forums and put your questions there. Okay. Thank you so much.